Hello again. This is Foghorn with another installment of Flight School Academics. For this, the 24th of May, 2955 or 2025 if you're stuck in the past. This is a presentation as part of an ongoing series of academics for the members of the Aurora Republic, the premier role-playing organization in Star Citizen. If you are new to the Aurora Republic or visiting for the very first time, let me start by saying welcome. Glad to have you with us and would love to hear from you if you're interested in hearing more from us. We're a lawful good organization focused on role play, exploration, and social interaction. Are currently active in recruiting on Discord and, of course, Spectrum. All right, tonight we are going to talk about weapons and countermeasures, and second to the last in our basic aviation flight school here. So BA100G. This is a big module, so we're gonna try to talk fast and move on. But please do feel free to stop me in the heat of battle to ask any questions that you might have. So we're going to go over, of course, gun characteristics and deployment. They have changed quite significantly. Missile characteristics and deployment also have changed quite significantly as of late. And then, of course, the onboard countermeasures, also known as OBCM, types of deployment, and the HUD symbology associated with all of that. So off to the races. Okay, so we've got 5 different types of weapons based on their type of damage that they put out, and the categories of weapons which are based on their refire delay. So the types of damage they got is ballistic, distortion, laser plasma, and tachyon. And of course the categories are cannons, gatlings, repeaters, and scatterguns. And then there are a couple of specials in there too that we'll talk to as we get there, but let's get started with ballistics. So ballistic cannons have actually basically everything has had tweakage to happen to the numbers from the last time that we did this almost a year ago. So a lot of things that had just last time, a lot of weapon types and categories had just been leveled, so it didn't matter which which size 1 ballistic cannon you chose. They all had exactly the same stats. That is no longer the case. So there is now some level of differentiation even within gun A to gun B, both within a category and a size class. So as you can see on the numbers there, you're going to see that most of your weapons are going to have sort of one of 3 weapon speeds. They're going to kind of be something that's roughly 1,000, 1,400, or 1,800, but there are some outliers within there. Ballistic cannons typically have some of the fastest projectile speed. Some of those going up to 3,000 or 5,000 meters per second, which makes that lead or lag pipper stay pretty close to the target all the way out. Max ranges, you can see over there on the far right. Pretty much most things size 1 are going to be roughly 1,000 meters sort of max range. You have severe damage fall off outside those ranges, so pretty much you don't want to be shooting much outside of a kilometer because you're just spraying a lot of ammo out there without a whole lot of effect. That is a typical thing across pretty much all of the weapons, regardless of types. So it doesn't matter whether it's ballistic, laser, or anything. They have out to a certain range, they do a lot of damage, and then they have a rapid range fall off, or a rapid damage fall off as you get extended out in range. So there's sort of a sweet spot you want to learn to be shooting at. Anything in that side of a kilometer is probably very near to that sweet spot. The perfect sweet spot's right about 500 meters. That works pretty well across all of the weapon types that we're going to talk about. With ballistic cannons, by the nature of the word cannon, means that it fires very slowly but does much larger alpha damage, which is generally true. And then you've got the very special ballistic cannon, number 10 down there, or I should say size 10, and that is, of course, the railgun out on the Idris M. So that's our newest player on the block there for the ballistic cannons. Ballistic gatlings, these are actually the multi-barrel that spin. Otherwise, a gatling and a repeater would be the same thing, but the way CIG has decided to slice that, gatlings are multi-barrels that spin, and repeaters are Buddha guns that maybe have 2 or 3 barrels that will fire interchangeably, stagger fire with each other in a sort of a chain gun style, more of a chain gun style versus a Gatling gun style. As you can see, they have much higher burst damage, but much lower alpha damage because of the fact that you're trying to fill the sky with ammunition. Fire rates are in the low 1,000, so 1,200 to 1,600-ish for most ballistic Gatlings. They have fairly high projectile speed. Again, they'll typically have 3 within those ranges that you'll see. So like on the size 2, you'll typically see a 1,200, 1,400, and a 1,600. Is what I noticed when I was studying these tables. Ammo counts are the big thing. These are, the ballistic weapons are ammo based, so they do run out. And then, but you'll also notice that they can actually reach out and touch someone, noticing that some of their ranges are almost double what that of the cannons are. So again, they do have a damage fall off over distance, more pronounced out at the outer ranges. So these things actually work fairly decent out to, we'll say 1,500 meters if you can put rounds on target, which is the hard part. Again, I do not suggest that you shoot out that side of a kilometer if you're using that, if you're using any of these weapons, because your accuracy goes to shit and your damage falls off very rapidly. Repeaters, there's really only 3, 1 for each size class, 1, 2, and 3. As you can see out there, they're very similar to the Gatlings. They have higher burst DPS than cannons, but lower alpha damage. They'll have a 500 rounds per minute fire rate, and again, about 1,200 bullet speed, around 1,000 rounds of ammo, and they shoot out to about 2 clicks. Scatterguns is a shotgun. So ballistic scatterguns, again, you can also see that there's only 1 offering per size class for 1, 2, and 3. High burst damage, high alpha damage, slow refire rate, and you got to get real. Well, actually, they have changed the ranges, so they have a very large fall off over distance. So while they can put pellets out to 2,000 meters, your damage, the spread is going to be so far apart that you're not going to be doing a huge amount of damage out there. So again, you probably want to keep in really close and treat this like a shotgun, like video game shotguns, in other words, which have no range, even though that's not really true in real life. And then one of our first of the really odd ducks is the rocket pods that basically come standard on a few turrets of like I think the Vanguard Harbinger has the turret is actually a pair of rocket pods. The only difference between size 1, size 2, and size 3, there's actually no difference between each of those sizes. They're all actually all the same rockets for these Jericho rocket pods. The only difference between size 1, 2, and 3 is the number of rockets in the pod. So you're going to be shooting, 6 to 12, depending on whether it's a single. It's 6 per pod. So 6 to 12, whether you have like 1 on one side, or they typically are mounted in pairs, but that isn't necessarily have to be that way. For example, the Mustang Delta has hard points and comes with rocket pods out on the hard points, and you can actually, so which means that you can actually put them in different fire groups and shoot just a single rocket pod of 6 versus having to pair them up in 12. But obviously, if you're like on the Harbinger turret where it has 1 on each side and you're not stagger fire, you have it in group, you're going to be shooting 12 at a time, is your rocket shotgun sort of idea. And then size 2 is just simply double those, and size 3 is simply triple of those. So they all shoot out to about 2,100. They are unguided, so it is totally on you, your eyeball, and using some Kentucky windage. Distortion. So distortion damage doesn't do a whole lot of damage, physical damage to the target, but it disrupts shields and it disrupts systems in the ships. Basically, it's sort of EMP bullet, if you want to kind of think of it that way. So burst DPS is distortion damage, very different than physical damage. So there are different damage types of damage. So this burst DPS for distortion cannons is distortion damage, not physical damage. Same for the alpha damage. They all shoot 100 or 150, depending on there is on the size 2. There's actually 2 offerings with a 1300 meter per second bullet speed, and they shoot out to about 2 kilometers. Distortion repeaters, again, there are 2 offerings in the size 2 and only a single offering in 1 and 3. So burst DPS is lower is higher, but alpha damage is lower. Refire rate's about 400 or 500, depending on that one extra odd one with similar bullet speeds and similar ranges. Distortion scatterguns only come in big, so size 4, 5, and 6, a single offering in each. You can see the big burst DPS, big alpha damage on those. Very slow firing because it's a distortion shotgun. These are great for taking down shields, and these are great for disabling ships if you have a mount big enough to mount one of these bad Johnnies. Bullet speed is extremely slow, so you got to get close. And then you got about 1400 meters. So again, compared to some of the other weapons that reach out there 2 kilometers, that's relatively short. That brings us to laser, which is a favorite amongst most folks who don't like having to constantly go back and get more ammo. They'll usually limit and change their loadouts to lasers so they can stay out there if they're just doing endless grinding of bounties. So laser cannons, you can see there for the burst DPS, they're slow, usually a little bit lower burst DPS, but higher alpha damage because of their slower fire rate. Bullet speeds again are typically something like 1,000, 1,400, or 1,800, depending on which model within the size 1, 2, and 3 categories that you're looking at, and they typically will shoot out to 2 kilometers or a little more, out to 2, maybe 2.5 on the size 3s. We have actually a very well populated table here. We've got offerings at pretty much all size categories up to size 9 for some of the big capital ships. So as you can see there, which is pretty interesting. Laser repeaters, again, you see the burst damages, they're roughly in line with laser cannons, but they do it with smaller alpha damage because they're going to put more rounds downrange with the higher fire rate. Similar speed on the bullets and similar ranges. Laser scatterguns, similar to all of the earlier comments I made about all the other kind of scatterguns, except for that this damage is all physical damage and heat damage, not any distortion damage on these. So burst DPS, as you see there, they're almost in line identical with the alpha damage because of the fire rate is almost 60 rounds per minute, which would be one shot per second. This is actually 50, so it's very slightly slower than that. Slow bullet speed and about 2 kilometer max range. However, you're going to want to be close because it's a shotgun. It's a scattergun. So, and then of course, the new toy we were playing with last weekend and a couple of times during the week, the laser beam weapon, which there is only one. It is size 10. It is on the front of the Idris P if you're using the K kit. That puts the big, as we call it, the big FU laser, the Beefle. So the Beefle is 15,000 points of burst DPS damage. That is at contact, and that is 15,000 per second that you are holding it on the target. It has a 5 kilometer range. So as far as capital ships go, that's actually a little bit close. We were able to target people out at 10 kilometers and had the urge to squeeze the trigger and shoot the laser beam out at that range, but you are out of range. No kidding, it damage all falls off right at the end. It also does a considerable amount of heat damage. It also does a certain amount of distortion damage in there too. So yeah, laser beam. Cut ships in half. It's fun. Plasma. All right, so plasma cannons. There are only 3 offerings, so you can see some of the stats there. And you should not care at all about plasma yet because they are only a Vandal weapon. The only way you can get them is they come stock if you have purchased or gotten your hands on somehow a glaive, a blade, or a scythe in the various ways that you can get your hands on those. And or we probably, I would expect, are going to see a lot more offerings in the plasma department once Squadron 42 comes out and stuff starts flowing over to Star Citizen from Squadron 42 after its release next year. Tachyon. Okay, this is from the, I believe is the Banu Defender that started using Tachyons with the Singe weapons. They are sort of a laser beam weapon, except for they're basically a hold the trigger down to charge, and then it fires when you let go. So you can actually, there is some variability in these DPSs and alpha damage based on charge time. So the fire rates are based on a full charge, because obviously you can shoot faster if you don't charge it, but you're just going to be dazzling the target with this little light laser beam that doesn't do a whole lot. So to actually get the Tachyon cannons to do damage, you do need to go to a full charge. Once you've held the charge and you're holding on to it, it doesn't fire until you let go. So once you have the full charge, doesn't mean you have to shoot right now. You can kind of hold it down and fly around until you think you're going to get a hit, and then let it rip. It is 3,000 meter per second bullet speed on all of them, but only about 1 kilometer to 1,500, depending on the size that we're talking about for Tachyon cannons. Okay. Any questions or anything on the gun tables? You can find all of these numbers in more detail on, of course, Urkel.games, which has all of these available if you want to look them at them in tabular format. And if you want to go build your custom loadout for your ship, that's a good place to go in and do that. Question?
Yeah, I noticed there was no efficiency on any of those tables, or I don't know if
I didn't write them on there, but there is an efficiency rating. I'm not 100% sure exactly what they mean by efficiency per se.
On Hercule, efficiency is basically the amount of I forget if it's the amount of shots or the amount of DPS. I think it's the amount of DPS you get per block of energy or power allocation spent on the weapon.
Okay.
Right, it has something to do with capacitor and output. So your reactor will have your power plant will provide so much power, and weapons have some sort of power, a power pool. But I don't know how it works. I just was curious if this was part of the guns thing. So
I have not studied into it enough to know what goes into those efficiency ratings. It does sound like you're going to get this much DPS per this much power is what it sounds like to me based on your guys' talk, but I don't know that for 100% sure. So it is something that's on there on the tables. It does show that up on Urkel.games. So you can go there if that's what you think the characteristic of interest is, the statistic of interest. This is more about how much damage and how far does it go and all that kind of stuff for combat employment. Okay, so for gun employment, remember, regardless of what the type is, you basically have to have 3 things for you to be able to successfully hit anything with a gun. You have to be in range, you have to have the weapon in plane with the target, and you have to be pulling lead if the target is moving at all. So, for example, we have aiming assistance in Star Citizen in the form of a lead pipper or a lag pipper, depending on how you have it set up in either your options. There is even a hotkey that you can bind if you would like to be able to flip back and forth between them. If you like to use both in different situations, you can have it your way. It's like Burger King. So as you can see there, it is based on both the velocity vector of the target and the velocity vector of the shooting platform yourself. So your spacecraft plus what you're doing with your spacecraft plus what the target is doing, and it won't necessarily be out in front of the nose of the target. It depends on where the target's velocity vector is. So if he's sliding around doing helicopters on acid type stuff, he's flying backwards and things like that, the lead pipper will be out in the plane of motion, out in the along that velocity vector out ahead of him. If it is a lead pipper, it'll just be a dot or just a circle out there in front. And the intent is you put your crosshair on the circle and squeeze the trigger. And if he doesn't jink within the time of flight of the bullets getting out there, this is where faster time of flight on the bullet is better, because the pipper will be both closer to the target, meaning you have to pull less lead, and it gives them less time of flight for that round to get to the target, to give him an opportunity to jink out of the way. The lag pipper is basically on a string coming off of the crosshair in the direction of where the rounds will go. So whereas on a lead pipper, you're putting your crosshair on the dot and shoot, and that should hit. With a lag pipper, you're putting the circle on the end of it on the target. The circle on the end of it is what you're aiming with. You put that on the target and squeeze the trigger. And if he doesn't flinch within the time of flight of the rounds, then he will get hit. It is a death dot. All right, that's all guns. Now for missiles. Too close for guns, going for missiles. All right. So they're basically three types in Star Citizen. You got electromagnetic, infrared, and cross-section, which is very silly because those all three are basically the same thing. IR is just a specific small tiny zone of the electromagnetic spectrum. So the way I read this is that electromagnetic, they mean RF, they mean radio frequency. In other words, radar. It's a radar guided missile, an infrared guided missile, and the cross section one is basically a radar guided missile. However, with cross section, it's more of what we would call in real modern day, fourth and later gen fighters, we would call that more of a pseudo imaging IR, an imaging seeker, where it actually works more like a TV. It sees the shape of your spacecraft and then uses that to track you in. So the cross-section missiles have the fastest acquisition time, but they're also the most easily bluffed. The EM missiles are the slowest acquisition time, aka lock time, but they are the hardest to get rid of. And the infrared missiles are right in the middle. So here are the characteristics are based on size of the missile, not tracking, not tracking type, not one of the three characteristic or categories. So within each one of these size classes, there are all three of those tracking categories available in various offerings. So in the size one, you're going to get somewhere around 1100 damage on explosion. They're going to have, most of them have a 0.1, so a tenth of a second lock time, followed by a tenth of a second ignite time. So these things, the small ones, come off the rail fast. You can lock them fast, shoot them fast. The fastest of the missiles, so they're 1,372 meters per second, all of them, and they're have a 1-click min range and a 10-kilometer max range. There are a couple, there's like one weird one in there that has this really long 0.9 lock time for some reason, and it has that 0.2 ignite time. Don't really know why. The other really weird one is in the size 2 class. The reason why it suddenly has this really high 4,000 damage statistic is specifically for the Rattler 2s. Which do 2,600 physical and about 1,400 energy damage for about 4,000 total damage, because that's the only cluster missile in the game. So you shoot that and it goes a short distance off the jet as a single missile, and then it goes, and then it's like a whole bunch of cluster, like little miniature MIRV warheads coming in on the target from multiple directions and all that. That is the one that has the strange, where it's a 0.84 lock time, same ignite time as everybody else, about 1,000 meters per second speed, just like everybody else. And all of the other size 2s have a 1 kilometer min and a 10 kilometer max, but the Rattlers have a 500 meter min and a 5 kilometer max. So that one's the odd duck in the size 2s. Then you can see all the rest. You see, generally speaking, as you get a bigger missile, they slow down in speed, therefore being easier to shoot down. Ones and twos, size 1 and size 2, have a 1 kilometer min range and a 10 kilometer max range. 3s and 4s have 1.5 kilometers and a 25 kilometer max range. And then when you get up into the torpedoes, as you can see, as you get larger in missile size, the missiles get slower and become longer ranged as far as their max. There is some weirdness where in the size 10s and 12s, the distances, the min range goes down from 5 to about 2.5 to 3 kilometer min range, depending on what you're talking about. I think that is probably because they've been seeing, as we've gotten the opportunity to start playing with the Polaris and the Idris, I think they're realizing that those min ranges on some of the torpedoes is too far away, that they basically can never use torpedoes because they're getting inside of 5 kilometers. So those size 7 and size 9 torpedoes now become unusable at that ranges. So I suspect in the future here we're going to get torpedoes tweaked again as far as like their min ranges, as they see us play with these capital ships and see kind of how things go, and see how many torpedoes are being launched and shot down. Oh, there we go. All right. So yeah, like I said, the bigger the boom, the longer the lock. That's the other part, is it takes longer to lock things on as you get bigger and bigger in the missiles. Basically, 4 steps in the employment. First, you got to make sure the target that you want to shoot is your sensor target of interest, and aka that you have it locked on with the reticle. As far as this is your target that you've selected with the little sort of square corners that float around it. Switch to the missile operator mode, which I believe is still a short middle mouse button click. These are default keyboard and mouse flyer key bindings. And then you have to get the lock, hold the TOI within that missile field of view, whether you're doing it with the nose of the airplane or whether you're using maybe an off-bore sight technique with a head, some sort of a head tracker or similar technique to get it in there until you see the 3 partial pieces of a circle come floating in, lock around the guy, stable, and stay there. And then you can let it rip by then doing a long click on the middle mouse button. All right, onboard countermeasures. So that's how to shoot missiles at people. How do we defend ourselves when missiles get shot at us? You basically have 2 different onboard countermeasures. You have a noise field countermeasure and a decoy. Both of them work on all missile guidance types. However, decoys will work better on some and noise field work better on others. And it also works on sensors too. So you can actually break a ship's sensor track on you, at least temporarily, by employing some onboard countermeasures. So the noise field are known as, or I should say the 3-1 brevity code is chaff for that. Basically, you're going to throw out a lot of this sort of confetti that reflects sensors, energies back to them. And the idea is it just gives a big cloud of similar sensor contact that the spacecraft, that then hides the spacecraft and hopefully confuses the missile to the point that it loses track on your spacecraft. Decoy countermeasures are a point defense type of thing. The call for that is flare. And you puke out several of those, put some G on the jet to move away from them, and hopefully the missile bites off on the decoys instead of you. And therefore you build in a mess. The best countermeasure, of course, is using both. When you can, you have far less chaffs than you have flares. So use them as appropriately, and always remember that you don't ever just pop those things and just sit there. You always pop onboard countermeasures whenever and put G on the jet at the same time. So you need to move. Because just because the missile has been spoofed by these things and comes flying into the cloud, not knowing where you are, if you are still close enough, you may still get caught in the blast. So HUD symbology has been ever changing as they've been improving the HUDs. With the new HUDs that come up now, that we have master modes and sub modes. So when you're going to use the guns, the first thing you're going to be looking at is in the upper left corner if you're using the advanced HUD, and I'm going to assume that you are, and you should. So you're going to make sure you're in SCM master mode and gun sub mode. It's displayed in the upper left corner with a little row of bullets in a circle so that you have a symbology for a quick glance to know which mode you're in. The bore sight cross will be where it always is. In this picture, it's hiding against Korea Station there, so it's hard to see, virtually impossible, but trust me, it's there. You can take a look at what gimbals and gun groups without having to look down at your MFDs. You can see that in your MFD cast up onto your visor if you have that selected, and it defaults to being selected. So as long as you didn't change it, it should be up there, where you can see gimbals FXD for fixed, and then what gun groups you have that you're currently getting ready to shoot. Your gun quantities will be underneath it of the visor cast. If it is a laser or an energy, I should say a rechargeable energy weapon that does not depend on ammo, but is depending on capacitors, then it will have an additional little line underneath the quantity, so that as you say, if you were shooting on this arrow, if you're shooting that laser repeaters, 68 shots until they're out, and that little line will deplete from right to left. So it's a little bar graph is what that is. And then you will see that when you let off the trigger, you will see that refill as the capacitor recharges and that number of shots comes back up. If it doesn't have a line under it, that's a ballistic weapon that and you can see what your ballistic ammo count is there and how you got left. Those, however, don't recharge themselves, obviously, because they are until you go back and land and you can get rearmed, restocked. In the upper right corner of the HUD, you will see your OBCM display, where it'll display the quantity of those decoys and noise that you have left. And if you have any of those set up to salvo fire, like you can with the decoys, then they will show where that eye is, will tell you that whether or not you're set to say pop a salvo of 2 for every weapon press, or for every button press, or 3, etc. There is also the addition of the precision sub mode in with guns. You basically right click just like you're aiming down sight. So if you are in SCM guns, when you right click, boom, you go into this guns sub mode. You can also see it because it adds the dash PRE under gimbals, and you get this new HUD that you see here as depicted here in the thing in the presentation. All else remains the same and is just nothing more than a different layout with a zoom function where you are zoomed in. If you're trying to shoot specific things, like you're trying to shoot specific turrets or trying to hit engines or hit shield generators. SCM missiles. So again, similarly, you need to be in SCM master mode, but there's a missile sub mode. You'll know that up in there in the upper left, just like you will for guns. It'll say MSL underneath SCM to let you know that you're a missile, and you get a little missile icon inside the circle. Over above your visor cast for your MFD, in the upper left of your visor, you will see the currently selected missile and its quantity left to fire. And then right next to it, you will see not highlighted. You'll see the next to shoot. So if you do a missile step to change missile types, you'll know what the next one is. And these things scroll right to left as you hit missile step if you have more than 2. Right. So if you had three different missile types hanging off of your wings or whatever, you hear it says, Dominator 2, Ignite 2. And if you had a rack of Rattler 2s, then as you hit missile step, you would see where it says, Dominator 2, there's 3 of them left hanging on the wings. That's highlighted because that's the one that's armed and ready to shoot. Ignite 2 with 3 of them left is next. And then if you hit step, the Ignite 2 would slide over to where the Dominator 2 is. Dominator would slide to the left off screen, and the Rattler and Rattler 2s with however many are there would replace where the Ignite 2 is. Then above that, there is a segmented bar graph going left to right, and you will see that when you very first kick into the missile sub mode, you will see that line go brrr, and fill up from the left to the right, showing the prep time for the missile when it gets fully loaded to the all the way up to the far right, the way you see it now. The number above it where it says 1/1, when it's in the process of arming and that bar is filling up, you will see 0/1 if you're only going to shoot one. And then when it hits boop all the way full, that means that the arming process is complete. You'll see armed in the upper left. You'll see a symbol for whether this is EM, IR, or CS. So with the lightning bolt, that is an EM missile, the Dominator 2. And it'll say that you're shooting one of one so you can see how big the salvo is, because you can shoot multiple missiles at once of the same type. So if you had increased your missile salvo count to 2 or up to 3 here as it's displayed, it would say 0 of 3, and then you'd see that bar fill up from left to right, and you'd eventually say 3 of 3. That means on a single missile press, you're going to get 3 missiles that come off at the target if you want to salvo fire. All right. And then, of course, missile range is actually following the target on the target designation reticle. So you put the reticle that's on the guy as it locks him, you will see right on the target his range wherever he flies around. I didn't have anybody in my field of view here to be able to lock when I took the screenshot. So you're just going to have to take my word on that. And I'm sure that if you've been flying here for the last couple months, you probably have already seen it. All right. What about when you get missile warning from somebody shooting at you? You will get the same symbology as you get for the missiles guidance type that you have going on the outbound. They use the same ones. So you get the lightning bolt for an EM missile coming at you, the flame for an IR, and the Wi-Fi symbol for a cross-section missile being shot at you. It flashes right dead center or just below your gun cross, right in big red letters, inbound missile, and it gives you this circular countdown that counts down counterclockwise. So in the EM, that's showing that, and that's the time of flight in seconds. The number underneath is the number of missiles inbound. So on that EM example on the left, where it looks like you've got 3 clock positions, if it's from 976, 9876. So it's basically that thing's 3 seconds out. In the IR example, that thing is about 11 seconds, 10 or 11 seconds out. And in the cross section one, that's 6 to 7 seconds out is how that works. Like I said, warning type, quantity, and count down until it gets there. All right. Any questions before we go fly?
Is there an optimum time to deploy your countermeasures? Because, for instance, you get notification of lock and notification you've got inbound ordnance. It seems that I can never get my timing right. For instance, whenever I deploy, I always get hit. Doesn't seem to matter when I deploy flares or chaff. I get hit. Maybe it's, and the only thing I can think of is that maybe my timing is off, that I'm waiting too long to deploy, or I'm deploying it too early, or I don't know what.
Or you're not puking enough. Yeah, all of those are possibilities. I don't know. I haven't done enough experimentation because I've been holding off on experimenting on timing for countermeasures just because they're still changing stuff. So I don't want to waste my time now knowing that it's just going to change again in another patch, particularly seeing as how they're putting out a patch a month now. It's like, when it was going to be 3 months, it might have made a little bit of sense, but that, and you also have some extremely smart people like Camerel and some of those other folks out there who might end up doing that for us. And so I'm not rushing to figure that out quite yet.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but eventually, so what I can only tell you anecdotally what I've noticed, which hasn't been much. It seems to me that the times that I have gotten a successful break lock using countermeasures is early versus late. So pretty much as soon as it goes whop, 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 and starts whining at you, I start puking countermeasures and maneuvering. And that usually will break the lock and get the missile off me. If you now that's not based on realism. We could have hour-long discussions on that, which I don't want to get into, but that's only what I've noticed. If anybody else has noticed anything else for
Yeah, I can
optimal,
add a little bit on the subject of countermeasures properly working. Is I've noticed that a lot has to do with your IR emissions, meaning if you're at the point of you launching countermeasures, at the same time you're using boost, it's as if you never launched countermeasures because your IR goes through the roof. And I've also noticed that if your main thrusters are engaged, that also tends to lead to a slightly higher IR output than if you're just using your strafing thrusters. What I tend to do is I just launch 3 consecutive single flares while I strafe either to the left or to the right. And that has like a 90% um, jinx success rate.
Yeah, I was gonna say if in terms of flying it like a jet that you would fly DCS or something and trying to maneuver and use flares, I found that if you try to do that the way you would in kind of 20th century or 21st century combat, it won't work. The missiles will hit you most of the time. But if you pop early and maneuver out a plane without using afterburner, if it's a IR, or without doing a lot of maneuvers, just maintaining your forward movement, but maneuver with thrusters in any different flip direction, then there's some considerable chance to knock them off your tail. So it's seems like the programming is a little bit on the soft side. They haven't really solidified it yet.
exactly.
I also noticed too that if you pop countermeasures and they do work, you'll get the noise, or I'm sorry, you'll get the sound notification that your ship is putting out. That will go away. So I usually just pop them until I hear that go away, or until the missile hits me.
Roger. Any other questions?
Yeah. So, with the counter, the detector thing that goes off, you said it was IR, radar, or cross section.
EMIR cross section, yes.
Yeah. So it gives you that indication, but does that actually matter?
Short answer, no. Slightly longer answer, that decoys and noise both work on everything, but to varying quality. So I suspect that decoys work really well against IR missiles, but not so much against cross-section missiles. And they work medium against EM missiles. I'm making this up. This is not this is just my kind of guessing. It's something like this. And then noise works really well against cross-section missiles, don't work so much against IR missiles, and work medium against EM missiles, something like that. So that you've got 3 different missile types, you've got 2 different countermeasures. So countermeasure A is going to work really well against missile type 1, medium against missile type 2, and not very good against missile type 3. And the countermeasure B is going to work not so good against missile type 1, medium against missile type 2, and really well against missile type 3. So if you put out both, you probably have the maximum protection against all 3 missiles, because you'll have the not so good and the really good one on missile type A, the not so good and really good one against missile type B, and 2 medium ones against missile type 2. So I think that's the Rochambeau game that they have kind of built into it as it stands now. There's also another technique. If you happen to have something appropriately sized nearby that you can get to before the time of flight of the missile, is you can also just put floating terra firma in between you and the missile. That's the other thing is you can do is you can break line of sight by flying around behind an asteroid or behind the station or behind a significantly big enough ship or a significantly big enough piece of debris. So there's also that. That's basically in the real world, fighter world, we'd call that terrain masking. You can basically sort of terrain mask. I have successfully done that before with people who were shooting at me PvP, who didn't understand a lot of this stuff. And so I just basically hugged an asteroid and just kept the asteroid between me and them until they got bored and left, to leave me alone. So there's that one too. That's not really a countermeasure. That's just putting your spacecraft in an advantageous spot. Let the missiles splash on the asteroid and not hit you. So, any other questions?
One more question, and that'll be it.
Sure.
So, like the missiles, like some of them are considered strike missiles or impact missiles, and some of them are like explode. They explode before they hit the target. They just try to get close to you and explode. And then there's some that they have to actually connect with the.
Yeah, that's a video gameism. I have not looked at that recently. I haven't refreshed memory recently enough on all of that. I think it's a little bit down in the weeds. In real life, all missiles have both capabilities. Pretty much all air-to-air ordnance has both a crush fuse in the nose, so if it does manage to actually spear the target, it blows up. And it has a prox fuse too, so if it gets within whatever its lethal range is of the target, it pops itself to just shower the target in fragmentation of exploding missile. So just for your own edification, historically, air-to-air missiles actually almost never spear the target. I think worldwide, the number one air-to-air missile for actually spearing a target in test, because we don't have any feedback from actual combat, right? It's not like air-to-air missiles have telemetry, on them the way they do in test. You guys are unfamiliar in test. When we test fire missiles, we actually take the warhead out of the missile, and that's the spot in the missile where the telemetry package goes in. And the telemetry package has a small explosive in it, just enough to break the missile apart from the ground during test. So the AIM-9 family of missiles has the most drone kills from actually just spearing the thing, and that's only about 15% of the time. So the vast majority of air-to-air missiles never actually spear the target. They just get close enough and blow you up with themselves. So their missiles are little suicide kamikaze airplanes, if you will. They just fly up next to you and explode, and your airplane gets ripped and torn apart. And if CIG has Star Citizen made where there are certain missile types that have to no shit spear the spacecraft, unless you're about the only thing that would against a fighter sized target, that's kind of silly, because the chances of you being able to spear a fighter sized target, particularly if the guy's defensively maneuvering, it's got to be, the mathematical limit approaches 0. But if you're talking about a capital ship class target that, is too big and fat to be able to dodge, yeah, maybe that might make some sense. But then why are we bringing in bombers with torpedoes? If I can just huck, if I can, well, anyway, there's some video game isms in there. I don't know if they actually understand this about air-to-air missiles, or if they would even care to model the real world into their future fantasy world. So that wraps up this installment of Academics Foghorn. Hope you found it interesting and helpful. If you have any questions I didn't answer, please feel free to contact me via email, Spectrum, or Discord, or of course, comment section below if you're watching this later. I'll answer to the best of my ability as quickly as I see it. Hit those follow and subscribe buttons as appropriate. Comment your comments in the comments, and we will reply as soon as we can. Find out more information about the Aurora Republic at our bespoke website, aurorapublic.space, or of course on Spectrum at robertspaceindustriescom/org/aurora-rep. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time. Signing off with wishing you a very pleasant remainder of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Thank you so very much for watching.